Hi, my name is Albert, and this is the Python basics presentation. So before I begin, Nathan in the chat is going to send a Python compiler link, just online Python compiler where you can code along with me. And if you don't want to download anything, it's pretty perfect. And if you want for later reference, you can download VS Code, which Nathan should also send in the chat. Um, yeah, you can just if you want to download it, there's instructions how to set it up on the EMP Hackathon website. And the power and if Nathan can also send the PowerPoint link. So if you want reference to, or if you want to follow along with me on your own screen, or if you want to reference it later. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so this is basically an intro and an agenda. So about Python, the coding language Python, it's really one of the more simple coding languages, not like Java or C++. It's mainly a bridge between just learning all the concepts uh, for just like not knowing anything, and it's like a bridge between learning all the concepts and stuff before you get into actual syntax, because I know Java and C++ syntax is really hard to understand, but Python's is relatively easy. Um, so what we're going to be going through today, I'm going to be introducing uh, just the basic concepts: hello world, or print, input, then variable, operators, conditionals, booleans, loops, and types of errors at the end. Yeah, as I said, Nathan has sent out an email with the links um that you can access, so including this PowerPoint, the Python interactives at the end, and more information on all the concepts here. He'll also be sending them in the chat as well as I go through. I was gonna say something else. Oh yeah, and during this, if you guys want to code along with me, I have a couple of tasks that you can do to actually do it real time, and then I'll show the solution. And I also have a couple examples for each one. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, so hello world, otherwise known as print. It's definitely the easiest line of code you can ever print out. It's just it prints out a line of code for the user to see. The syntax is print
啊，
parentheses.
对，
So someone, okay, it's print parentheses quotation mark hello world, quotation mark parentheses. That line of code will print out hello world, as you can see in the picture below. But anything you put in the quotation marks, it'll print out exactly as it is. And a string is a variable that'll print out exactly what's in the quotation marks. So if you want to print out like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but you don't want it to be a number, yeah, you just put the quotation marks and it'll count as like a line, word, like a word line, a sentence. Um, and you can also use strings and inputs and variables, but I'll get to that later. And you just use the quotation marks. So to see it in real time, I have an example. This is just all the orange stuff is going to be used later, but for now, we're just going to be focusing on this one line of code that just says print hello world. And if you run it at the bottom, it just prints hello world. Yeah, that's pretty basic. Um, okay, next. I don't have a link for the print because it's not really something that complicated. So the next thing, it's input. It's basically the same as print in terms of syntax. Basically, the syntax is um, uh, what is your name, or like the input. The syntax is just input, and then the same thing as print. So the quotation marks and the parentheses. And then so for the example here, it says this will print out what is your name as a string in which the user will be able to respond to this line of code on the same line as the code. Um, so in the example, another example, in the picture, it says input, what is your name? And then when I press enter, it prints out a line of code that says, what is your name? But the user, me, will respond with my name. And something else that's important, but isn't really necessarily connected to input, is commenting. It's what you saw, those orange lines of code in the VS Code that I use. Um, it's just a way to write notes in the lines of code without disrupting the code itself. So it won't actually like read the lines of code. It's just for you and organization purposes. And you want to use a number sign for single line commenting. So if you want to comment out that entire line, or triple single quotation marks on uh, either side of the multiple line, or triple double quotation marks for multiple line comments. So to give you, okay, so here you can see that I have an example here at the top. It's a single line comment where it has a hashtag or a number sign at the start, and for multiple line I have the triple double quotation marks here, as well as at the bottom I have this here as well. So I'm gonna comment this out and then put this here. So we're just going to be running these two lines of code. It's just the same, but in real time. So if we run it, it'll say, what is your name? There's a little box here where I can type. Well, my name is Albert. So it'll say, hello, Albert. And this is like a concatenation, which I will explain later. Let's see, do we have tasks? Oh, we do. Okay. So let's go ahead and do these two print and input tasks. So tasks, let's give, this one should be relatively easy. We'll give like maybe 2 minutes for people to do this. Task number 1, it's just a print statement. It's print out a good morning message to the user. So just good morning. Yeah, give people 2 minutes to do that. Shouldn't be too hard. You can use the online Python compiler. It should work just fine. And after a couple minutes, I'll put the solution down here.
You know how your view has like there's the coding and then there's more things to type in below. How do you get that view?
So the terminal down here, are you saying all this stuff right here?
Yeah.
Basically, if you're in VS Code, um, it opens up automatically when you run it. So if you go to the top right, you'll see this green triangle, which is just play. So if you press play, it'll or run technically. If you press run, it'll run the entire thing, and it should pop up automatically.
Oh,
Yeah,
I don't see that button.
you don't. The green.
I don't see it.
Okay. Did you name your this was in the instructions on the website, but did you name your program.py at the end of your name? Like for example, all these ones I have are task.py, test.py. That'll make it so it'll run in Python, and that should pop up here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You see it?
I haven't done it yet. I'll do it right now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm assuming everyone finished the print statement by now. Basically, the answer is just you do print parentheses quotation mark good morning user, and that's pretty much it. And it'll just print out exactly that. You press run at the top right, and oh, okay, I'm just gonna minimize this. There we go. And at the bottom, it will print out good morning user. Yeah, let's do task number 2, which is the input. basically you want to ask what city the user lives in. And if you remember, the input syntax is input, and it's just this, and then whatever you want to ask. So yeah, the task is just ask the user what city they live in. Oh wow, we got 22 people. Oh, okay. Let me zoom in real quick then. I don't know how to zoom in actually. Oh, that doesn't work. Are you saying zoom in to the code, to the terminal, or the actual lines of code that I write? The code. Okay. Let me see. Does it work if I highlight it? Because I'm not totally sure how to zoom in here. There we go.
Sorry, you can try doing Control
Yeah,
plus.
I just did that. There you go. Let me exit out of here. Okay. Yeah, that's just the lines of code. Okay. Yeah, no problem. Okay, I think everyone should have, if anyone has questions, you can speak up or type in the chat. I'll be checking it periodically. But basically, the solution to this task is input, and then it's the same as print, is input, what city do you live in? And usually after an input, you want to put a space inside the quotation marks after whatever you write in here, just to make it a lot easier to see in the code. If you don't put the space in, like if I do this right now and I run it, at the bottom here, oh, you know, let me just, there we go. Let me just make it better. If I put at the bottom and I type, I live in Seattle, it will be right next to the question mark, and it'll kind of just look all jumbled up. So instead, if you put a space here, and then you run it, you will type it a space after the question, which makes it a lot easier. And that's the end of the code, really. Let me just comment these out real quick. Okay. And we will get to the next task later. Let me go back to examples. Okay, so the next slide. So this is the variable slide. This is where we're getting to a little bit more complex stuff. Variables, it's basically just, it's like in math where you store variable like X, Y, Z. Variables can be stored in anything with anything. So you don't need just do letters or something. You could do, as in the example, you could do number equals 25, name equals Kieran, and B equals 3.5. It can be literally anything stored in anything. Notice in the example above, name equals Kieran. I found this off the internet, so it's not actually my name. So name equals Kieran is in a string, so it'll actually print out the string. And the number is an integer and B is a float, which I will get into. So here X equals quotation mark hello world quotation mark will make X the variable with the string hello world as the thing stored in the variable. And you can use X anytime you want to say hello world, instead of just saying print hello world. It just makes life so much easier. So so I talked about integers versus floats. They are different types of variables, kind of like string, but they're for numbers. So an int is the syntax in lines of code, but it really means integer. It will store any whole number to a certain number of digits. I'm not totally sure, but it'll store any whole number in the variable, and a float will can store decimal. Um, Yeah, variable as an integer, store whole numbers. And so if you want to convert an integer to a float or a float to an integer or a or uh or an integer or float to a string, those are called type conversions. The types of variables just converted, hence the name. So this tool is when you want to store a number as an integer, they convert it to a float later. Basically, the syntax is integer 100 or float 100.01. Or you can do integer and the variable that 100 is stored in. So let's say if you store 100 in variable y, you do integer y and or float y, and it'll automatically convert it to a float or an integer. And the syntax to convert a number to a string is str parentheses and then the variable inside the parentheses. You have to convert an integer or float to a string when you want to use it in print or input statements. I'll show examples of this. And if you want to add a variable to a string, or if you want to add a variable to a string, like in like a print statement, if you want to add, that's called concatenation. You basically just use the plus sign inside the parentheses to connect each variable to print. I know it sounds confusing. I'll show you guys. It's a lot easier to demonstrate than explain. So yeah, you just use the plus on each side of a string in a print statement to add it together. So an example of this is the integer section. Okay, so I'm going to, oh, I don't want to do that. Actually, wait, no, let me do this. I'm going to take out this one and then all the way down here. So we're going to see these three sections. The first section is the integer section. Basically, it's just a variable, or you have an integer here. If you don't put the integer at the start of an input statement when you want to store something as a number, it'll store it as a string. So if I don't have this integer here, and then I just say input, how many times have you washed your hands today? And I say maybe 7, I guess. It'll store it as a string and not an actual number. So, and then this is a type conversion. Basically the number equals float num. So before num, the variable, is stored as the integer 7, a whole number. But when you convert it to a float, it'll become a decimal. So it'll just, so since this doesn't actually have a decimal at the end, because 7 is a whole number, it'll just print out 7.0 instead. And so this is what I was talking about in concatenation. So I set the variable num1 as 30 and the item as the string disposable masks. So and then I did a print statement. Albert wants to buy 30 or string parentheses num1 plus item to be safe when outdoors. So since this is a string already, I can just put the plus signs here, and then it'll concatenate it with the rest of the stuff that you want to say in the print. And then it's the same here, except you have to convert a number to a string. So if I run these, how many times have you washed your hands today? Well, I think I've washed my hands like 8 times, I think. So I've washed my hands 8 times. First it'll print out it as an integer right here, and then it'll print it as a float because I converted it. And then I converted the same variable. And then I said, and then here, this line of code printed out, Albert wants to buy 30 disposable masks to be safe when outdoors. And yeah, one more thing to note, if you accidentally say, let's say I did say num instead of num1, I did num, which is the same exact variable as this before, it'll erase what's ever in the variable and store it as the new thing in the variable. Let's see, no questions. Okay, if there's any questions, you can ask them now because I know this is a little confusing. Okay, So for your next task for variables, should be this one right here. Yeah, this one right here. This one's a little longer, so I'm gonna give you guys probably 4 minutes-ish to do it. Basically, you want to ask the user for their name, and then you want to store that into a variable, and then ask the user how many masks they have at home, and also store that as a variable. Just a tip, make sure you store this one as a string. You store their name as a string, and you also store masks as a number because it's the number of masks. And then print out a message stating that parentheses that name has X amount of masks at their house. And then I'll print out the solution here. And the concepts you're going to use here are variables, input, print, basically everything we just learned. Highlight this for you guys. Doing great on time. Okay. So I'm going to write out the solution now. If anyone has any questions, and if something doesn't work, just feel free to ask. So basically you want to ask the user for their name. So input, you want to store that into a variable. So let's just random variable name, easiest, equals input parentheses, what is your name? And again, with this space at the end, so just make it a lot more neater. And then how many masks? Masks equals integer, because you want to store it as a whole number, unless someone has half of a mask. Input, how many masks do you have at home? And again, with the space. And VS Code, I know VS Code does it automatically when you put parentheses. They automatically put the parentheses on their side, so I don't have to worry about it. But make sure that you have the double parentheses, because this is one of the most common errors. If you accidentally take out this, if you don't put a parentheses at the end, only one, and it'll just result in an error and you can't run the code. And then you want to do a print statement, including these. Print name. Oh wait, no. Can I get rid of this? Okay. Print stating that name. So I have to have name first, plus, because I have to concatenate it. And then the lines of code I want to print out has, and make sure you put a space on the other side to make it look a lot neater. Has another plus, and then string masks, and then plus again, and you want to put another space, so just space at home. So, and then the parentheses, of course. So yeah, I think that's the solution. Let's run it real quick. What is your name? Well, my name is Albert. How many masks do you at home? I have a lot, so a couple thousand, I think. No, I don't actually have a couple thousand. Let's just say I have 20. Albert has, oh, okay, I didn't include masks. So yeah, so what I did here is I just did the variable mask and I didn't actually specify what I have. So masks at home. So if I run it again, Albert, oh, 20, Albert has 20 masks at home. And there it is. Okay, see a chat in there. Yeah, the name and the masks are variables, and what the user types in as a result of the input statement is what is stored inside the variables. So let me actually show you a real-time example of what happens if you have something else as your if you store something else as a name. So let's say name, I'm gonna use my good friend Dylan's name. So here I put in my name, which is Albert masks, but then I have the same variable here. And so basically what this line of code does, it erases what was already in name, which is Albert, and then it puts the new thing called Dylan. So this one instead will say Dylan has something masked at home. So I just run real quick. 20. It'll say Dylan has 20 masks at home instead of Albert. So yeah, you want to be careful with your variables. I can't type. Okay. Going back, no more questions. Next thing, so operators. This is going to be fairly easy. It's just so there are four kinds of operators. The arithmetic operators, which are just your basic math functions, add, subtract, multiply, divide, and modulus, which I will explain. And yeah, Nathan sent shout out to Nathan for sending all the links. Big help. So, and then the second type is assignment operators. These are pretty much the exact same as arithmetic operators, except it's slightly different. Basically, if the syntax is plus equals, minus equals, multiply equals, divide equals, modulus equals. If you do this on a variable, so x plus equals 1, it will add x. It'll add 1 to x and then store x as whatever the result of that was. And same for everything else. Yeah, that's probably as best as I'm going to get. And what modulus does, which is the percentage sign, is it calculates the remainder of a number whenever you divide by another number. So let's say I divide 10 by 3. You can't actually completely divide 10 by 3, and there's a remainder of 1. So the modulus will just, the modulus or the variable where you where you store the modulus function is, it'll just equal 1. So let's say I did 10 modulus 3, and I store that in a variable, that variable will equal 1 instead of 3.33. Yeah. And the next set of operators part 2. Okay. There are comparison operators. I'll get to these later for conditionals, but basically these are mainly used to check conditions where they compare two values, hence the name comparison operator. So greater than is and less than are pretty simple. There's also greater than or equal to, greater than or equal to, which is the equal sign after the symbol. And someone's someone's unmuted. If you could mute yourself real quick, that'd be great.
Check your Discord notifications.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And then we have equal to, which we'll be using a conditionals, which is equal sign, and not equal to, which is the exclamation mark equal sign. And then we have oh, my bad. And then we have logical operators, and, or not. These are basically the same as comparison operators, but they're more logical. So if something is not true instead of if something is not equal to. And yeah, these are also used to check conditions. And the and or are used to check multiple conditions or either conditions. Let's say if you have one condition and another condition, yet it will check if both are true, then it will run code. I will explain that. And then I guess I will share an example of a assignment operators. So this line of code, it looks like one big thing, but it's really not. It has a variable, and I store it as 10, and then I do plus, and then I do the variable plus or minus plus equals 2, and this should print out 12 because it adds 2 to 10, which is the original variable, and then it stores it again as the result of that. And then this will print out 12, 12, because this is now 12 instead of 10, minus equals 2. And then this should print out 10 because it subtracts 2 from 12 and then stores that in num2. And then multiply equal 2, divide equal 2, modulus equals 3. You'll be able to see everything. Oh. So if I run it, first thing that prints out is 12. 10 plus 2 is 12. Next thing is 12 minus 2 is 10. Then 10 times 2 is 20. And then 20 divided by 2 is 10. And then when you divide, it puts out a point. It puts out a decimal, so it makes it more accurate. And then a modulus 10.0 modulus equals 3 would be 1, like what is the example that I shared before. Do I have it? I do have a task for you guys on operators. This is going to be a really short one. It's not that hard. Basically, what you do is you ask the user for a number. You ask the user for a number using the input statement, and then you perform all 4 plus minus. You don't have to do modulus if you don't want to, but you can do all 4 plus minus multiply divide assignment operators on that number with whatever numbers you choose, and then you print the final number. And I'll give you guys 2 to 3 minutes on this one. This one's pretty easy. Okay, I'm kind of lagging behind on time, so I'm going to go a little faster. If you haven't finished your lines of code, that's perfectly fine. You can always finish it later, or you can just check the solution. So input, you want to ask the solution user. So, you want to assign this to a variable. So let's just do var for variable, which a lot of programmers, it's very common to use var for variable. Equals integer, because you want to set it as an integer, or you just want to set it as a number first, and then input what, enter a number with the space at the end. Gotta remember, put the space. Variable, and then you want to perform all 4 assignment operators. So var plus equals, just going to do simple numbers, 3, var minus equals 3, var, or actually I'm not going to do minus equals 3, that's boring. Let's do minus equals 7. Var multiply equals 100, and var divide equals 42. Yeah, that's all 4 assignment operators. And then print the final number. And then I just print var. Since I'm not concatenating it with a string, I don't actually have to set it to a string to print it out. Yeah, I'm not going to print it out individually after each thing. I'm just going to print it at the end. So input, enter a number. Let's go 200. 466.66. So 200 plus 3, 203 minus 7, 196. So yeah, seems about right actually. But basically, this is just the math section of Python. I'm gonna concatenate this out. Okay. Next, conditionals. This is where it gets interesting. This is where you can make all sorts of games and stuff. So if else statements, these are pretty interesting. If the if statements, if statements are statements that check if certain conditions have been met before executing code. There are many kinds of if statements. There's actually just 3, but there's if, elif, and else statements. You always start a body of conditionals with if, and then you transition to else if, and at the end you use else. So if statements will check its indent first, and then if the if statement isn't met, elif statements will check its indent. If you don't have a elif and you just have 2 ifs, it'll check both of them, even if the first one is true. So elif means else if. So if the if statement is true, it'll skip the elif conditional. It won't check it at all, and then it'll go straight down to the body below it. And if the ifs condition isn't true and the elif condition isn't true, and you're down to the else condition, then you just do else for anything else, any other possibilities, and then you run the body of code under else. So I think this picture to the right here explains it perfectly. You have a start code, and then when you enter the if bodies, you check the if condition. If the if condition is true, then you run the if body or the indented, because you have to indent the body, the lines of code. I'll show you later, but you run the if body code, and you will skip the else body, and then go directly to the lines of code underneath. But if the if condition is false, then you run the else body code, and then you go to the statement below that. And this is where logical operators and comparison operators are used. Logical operators and an or when you want both or either conditions met before running the indented code under it. Let me show you an example that I have here. Okay. So the if statements here, how many drops of, I ask a question and I store it in drops. How many drops of hand sanitizer do you want? And then the person enters a number. And then I say if drops is less than or equal to 4, then I print that's not that many. Elif, so if it's not less than 4, it'll skip this print. It'll still check it, but if it's false, it'll skip that's not that many, so you won't see it printed at all. And then it'll check elif, and if elif drops equals 5, which is equal to in the conditionals, if you just put an equal, it'll have an error. So elif drops equals 5, and you have to have the colon as well. Don't forget the colon. It's very important. If drops less than or equal to 4, elif drops equals 5, it'll print that's just about right. And then if that's not true, it'll check if drops equals to 6. And then if not, if that's true, it'll print maybe that's a little much. And then if all 3 of these conditions aren't true, which would mean that it's anything above 6, it'll print why would you do this? And we will see an example. So if we run it here, we're going to do this 4 times really quickly just to see all the outcomes. If drops is less than or equal to 4, so 3. If we have how many drops of hand sanitizer, I only want 3 drops, it'll print that's not that many. If we run it again, how many drops of hand sanitizer do you want? 5. That's just about right. And then if I had say 6, maybe a little too much. So that's where you see all the conditionals being checked. And if that one is true, it'll run the line of code that's indented in the body perfectly. And then let's just go crazy here. Let's say I want 1,000, or I don't know, what number that is. I want that many drops of hand sanitizer, which obviously it's more than 6. So it would print, why would you do this? Which is the else. So anything above 6 in which would be the else condition would print, why would you do this? So, okay, I have a task for you here. It's a conditionals task. Basically, if you you ask if the user is sick, if the user is sick, so you have a yes or no, and if the user is sick, print a message regarding to see a doctor. If the user is not sick, or else print a farewell message. And I'm going to give you a tip here when you want to use when you're using yes or no instead of numbers, you would still use strings. So let's say sick equals no. Let's say if you ask the user, they print out no as a string, then you have to say if sick equals 2, and then the string no. So that'll check to see if it equals the string instead of a number. So yeah, that get working. I'll give you guys probably like 3 minutes or something, or whenever I get bored. Okay. Yeah. If you have any questions, let me know, because conditionals is when it really starts getting pretty complicated. Okay. I know that wasn't much time, but we're kind of running out of time here. So I'm just gonna type in, and you can check your work if you want. So ask the user if the user is sick. I'm gonna say sick equals to input, because this time you don't need a number, so you don't need int. Int and then the string. Are you sick? Question mark, the space, and then I say if sick equals to lowercase. Oh, the capitalized will affect it. So if the person answers capital YES instead of lowercase es, then it'll print out the else instead of this if. So a way to combat that is you use the and. Use the and logical operator, and sick equals to this. Actually, I think it's or. Pretty sure it's or. Yeah. I get confused with this too. Logic. So need this. If sick equals this, or sick equals capitalized YES, print, need the indent, print please see a doctor immediately. Else, so if the user types literally anything else, print okay, bye. So we can see that in action right here. If I run it, are you sick? This might print out an error actually, but we'll see. Are you sick? Let's do the first one. Yes. Please see a doctor immediately. So it works. And if I do capitalize YES, please see a doctor immediately. If I do it again, and I just say anything, literally anything random, like that. And then I run it. It says, okay, bye. Literally anything else I type in to the question, it'll say, okay, bye. Yeah, that's that is the solution for this. Let me comment this out real quick, and then I'll get back to the presentation. Okay. So the next thing, this is going to be pretty easy. It's just a Boolean. It's just true or false, literally. It's just a fancy word for true or false statements. The syntax is a variable equals true / false. And for true and false, you need the capitalization on this in the code, or else it won't work. So syntax variable equals true / false. And you use booleans and if else statements as conditionals, as well as loops. But yeah, loops is after this. I'll get to it. So basically, to set a boolean, variable equals true, or variable equals false. Make sure you capitalize true or false. An example of this, yeah, I don't have a task for you because it's not really that complicated. An example of this is just another if statement, except this time I said mask equals true. If mask is true, this is where we see you can use is, or you can use equals to, or you can use is not. That will basically is not is basically this, and is basically this. They're all the same thing. It just I use this because I use is in booleans because it's a lot easier for me to see. If mask is true, print we are being safe and responsible. If mask is false, we are not being safe and responsible. So if I run this, it'll say we are being safe and responsible because I set the mask as true. If I set the mask as false, then I run it. We are not being safe and responsible, and you want to be safe and responsible, so set this to true. So that's basically booleans. It's just true or false statements. Okay, going back. Loops. This is where it gets interesting. Okay, I said that like 10 times. So for and while loops, loops are like if and else statements in that they need to first check for a condition to be met before they can execute their indented code. However, unlike in if and else statements, loops repeat their indented code for as long as the condition is met. So if the condition at the end of the loop code is still met, it'll repeat it and it'll just keep going and keep going and keep going until until the condition is false, which hence the word loops. So booleans mentioned before are a very common way of setting up while loops. For example, while finished is false, that will make a loop for while finished is false. And it's really common to set up games like that where they can go on and on until the person doesn't want to play anymore, and then they could break it. So if I share an example of this, would be loops num4 equals 0, and while this variable is less than 10, you would print the variable, and then after that you would do the assignment operator plus equals 1. So at the end of this code, while num4 equals 0, it'll print 0, and then it'll add 1 to 0 every time. So, and then this would become 1. Since 1 is still less than 10, it'll run these two lines of code over and over and over until num4 equals 11, and all 11 numbers 0 to 10 have been printed out. So, and then at the end, after this lines of code has been finished, it'll print done. See, this isn't indented, so this won't be included in the while loop. It'll print out after the while loop is done. So if we run this real quick, it prints 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then done. So it works perfectly like it's supposed to. I will explain this later, but there is a huge error that can happen if you're not careful with your while loops that can and will crash your computer. So you want to be careful when you're doing those. Okay. I should probably explain the error actually before I have you guys do this task. Basically, the error is a runtime error. This won't affect your code really, but let's say I completely disregard this line of code where I add 1 to it. Since 0 is always less than 10, and you never add 1 to 0, the num4 will never go will never be greater than 10. So this line of code will keep running until your computer crashes or you close the program, but when your computer crashes. And I'm not going to show this to you because it's going to take a while for me to log back in. So yeah, I hope you guys' computers are okay while doing this task. So what you want to do is you want to create a loop with a Boolean, example safe equals false. Ask the user how many times they have washed their hands today using input. If that number is lower or equal to a value of your choosing, print a message stating that they need to wash their hands more. And then if it's lower than the value you're choosing, if that number is greater than the same value of your choosing, end the loop. Say good job and end the loop so it doesn't keep asking how many times they have washed their hands, and then print a message thanking you, the user, for staying safe at the very end. Here, I'm a little short on time, so I'm just going to give you the solution, and this one's kind of complicated anyways. So create a loop for a Boolean. First, you have to set up your Boolean. So I'm actually just going to copy it directly. Safe equals false first. So while safe equals I'm going to do is false. Input. I'm gonna do ask. I'm just gonna do ask because I'm asking the question. I'm gonna set that as a variable. Input int input how many times have you washed your hands today with the parentheses, and then I do if ask is less than or equal to, let's say, 4, print please go wash your hands and try again. And basically they're stuck in this eternal loop if they never go wash their hands again. Elif ask is greater than 4, print good job. Yeah, good job. Thank you for staying safe. And then this is the most important part. After this, I have to end the loop. So I have to set the condition as false. So elif ask is greater than 4, I set safe is equal to true. So since safe equals to true after this, then this loop will end and then the program will end, hopefully. I don't want my computer to crash. Oh, typo here. Input. There we go. Yeah, let's run it. Oh, and this if and elif are all indented in the while, so it'll run inside the while loop. So if I run it, how many times have you washed your hands today? I run it only 3. Please go wash your hands and try again. See, and then it just keeps doing it again. So you don't have to keep writing if and elif statements every single time. Only 1. Try again. Let's say I ever do it 5 times. Thank you for staying safe, and the program ends, which is perfect because my computer didn't crash. Okay. Quick thing, wrapping up. I'm gonna go through this pretty quick, actually. So these errors that can happen in your code. So the 2 basic types of errors are syntax errors, and I explained runtime errors. Since I already explained runtime, I'm just going to explain syntax. Syntax errors are an error in the code itself, where it could be a problem in indentation or basically any simple typo made by the programmer. Let's say if you accidentally misspell print or input, it won't recognize that command, and it'll say an error and your code will not run. And some debugging techniques are just writing test code to the side, commenting out other kinds of code, and running test code to make sure that you don't have an error. I actually have a couple of, I was going to do this with you guys, but I guess I'll just do them alone. So these, wait, no, not that. So these couple of things or errors. Okay, so these all have errors that will not let you print the code. These 4 are syntax. This one is a runtime error. In this one, print hello world. As you may have noticed, you do not have the quotation marks here. You would need quotation marks on either side of hello world to be able to run this. And as you've noticed, VS Code actually alerts you if there's a problem in your code, which is actually very helpful. So, but some programs don't do that, so you want to be sure to check. So, and then here, name1 equals int. This may not seem like to be an error, but as you notice, the question is, what is your name? And unless your name is a number, you cannot answer this question correctly. If you run this and you type in a letter instead of a number when you're setting into an int, it will have a syntax error and your code will not finish. Number 3, I set num3 as 6. My name is Albert. This is the pretty same thing, except as you may have noticed, I need a plus sign here to be able to add Albert to the line of code, to the rest of the line of code. And since this is an integer, and I'm trying to convert it to a string to add it in, I do str parentheses and another parentheses on the side to make it a string, so I can concatenate it. I'm gonna reset that. So the next thing, x equals true. If x equals true, print x is true. There's again 2 errors in this. First of all, if x equals true, you need to have 2 equals to be equal to. So if x equals true, you do whatever in the indent. You cannot have just 1 equals, you need 2. And here, if x equals true, it won't run because there's nothing in this body of code. If you want to print x equals true in this body of code, you need to indent it. So if x equals true, print x is true. Number 5, this one's actually a runtime error, as I've explained before. Since 1 will always be less than 10, and this will always print 1, and you're not actually adding 1, so this condition will never be false. It will keep printing 1 at lightning speed until your computer crashes. Yeah, that's it for examples and tasks. Let's go back here. And okay, so wrapping up, if you want more, there's 2, Nathan should be sending in the chat 2 great interactives where it basically teaches you everything that I've taught you here in online, and you can even code inside it as well and test it out yourself. So I have Learn Python and W3 Schools for the interactives. And if you want to dig deeper into more intermediate levels of Python, there's realpython.com/tutorials/intermediate if you want to do if you want to go more deeper and harder levels in Python. Yeah, that's it. I think you should have put that in the chat. And yeah, that's it. Any questions? And the picture to the right is my dog. Yeah, no problem. His name is Loki. He's really cute. If you have any questions, you can speak up now. Otherwise, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to see my presentation, and I hope you guys have a great and fantastic day. And safe. Be safe.